The other thing that I think is kind of difficult, that I think is important to discuss in this moment, is something that makes a lot of folks very, very uncomfortable. And in this moment in time, with unemployment and issues revolving this coronavirus, this issue of money is really, really a big deal, because there are a lot of folks who cannot pay their bills, and they have a really, really hard time in handling money, and for some folks, managing money is really, really difficult. So the people who are in business on, all of these shows who are trying to help the public who have lost their jobs, and some of you may have lost your jobs because of the virus. You're being urged to contact your mortgage company if you own a home. Your parents may be, if they've lost their jobs, electric bill, phone bill, internet, all these kinds of bills, to be able to manage them if you have been laid off and you don't have the money to pay for them. But that step between I don't have enough money to pay for this and panic, and picking up, or not anymore picking up your phone, but I guess picking up your phone and dialing and contacting who you owe money to, there's a big disconnect there. And part of that reason is because there are a lot of folks in the country and around the world, really, who don't want to talk about money. Money is not an easy subject to talk about, and yet we must. And when it comes to manifest destiny and the market revolution and the development of transportation systems to bring goods from one place to another, is about a monetary economy. It's about money. The very basic levels, at the foundational levels, this is about money and the movement of money and the movement of goods, which is equal to the movement of money, because goods represent money. So if you have one item to sell, it is valued at this amount of money. So they're basically, while they might not be exactly the same, their leverage, their value is equal. And there are a lot of issues that this country and various other countries have dealt with regarding the expansion and the development of new areas, and it has a lot to do with being able to extend out trade. And this is a really big deal, but it's also not the most pleasant subject. And for a lot of folks, money equals economics, and going to economics 101 is not very exciting. And so it's like, well, I'm bored to tears, or I just really want to avoid this subject. I have one daughter who wants to avoid anything that has to do with money, and I have another daughter who is hypervigilant. So everybody is different when it comes to this. But as we move forward in our chapters of Manifest Destiny and Westward Expansion, we have to look at it through a lens that includes a very big deal about money, because money is power. And who has the most money, or where the most money is, or who has the most resources to leverage money, has a great deal to do with who has the power. Now, last week, when we were talking about the new Constitution and the Constitution creating the very beginnings of what would become and remains and will probably remain the biggest area of irritation or issue in this country, is that between who has more power, the federal government or the states. States' rights versus federal rights. I mean, we're dealing with it right now with the coronavirus. I mean, at this moment, there are arguments over should the governors have been ready for a pandemic? Or is it really realistic for them to be ready for a pandemic? Does the federal government have any responsibility in this and maintaining any kind of order or helping the states get these things? Where is the power lying? Who owns that power? And how much ownership do each side have? So this is, even in this moment, we are dealing with states' rights versus federal rights and the rub between the two. Who has the most power? So that starts with the Constitution, but as we do westward expansion, manifest destiny, westward expansion, and the transportation of goods and services, that is money. That's power. Who has the most? So this is as we are moving forward, this is a pretty big deal. And it's going to eventually come to a head and going to be part and parcel the cause of the Civil War. So as we move west, we're looking at transportation, getting goods to and from one part of the country to the west. It's also going to be dealing with who has the right to go west, who has the ability, not the physical ability or the capability, but who is able, who's allowed really to expand in the West. And I will tell you, it is not free blacks. Once again, part of institutionalized racism as we go forward with like the Oklahoma territory. But we're just at the very beginning of this now as new areas in the West begin to move or to develop, because manifest destiny, which means that basically, God grants us the, and expects us to go west and make the West like us. Really, basically, make the West European. And in doing so, during the process of manifest destiny, and as we move into the Jacksonian era, we're seeing that there's a financial aspect to it, which is a very fundamental aspect to it. We're going to move west, we're going to open new markets, and we're going to expand market share. That's a very big deal, meaning people who own companies and are able to put money into those companies to expand west now have the ability to get more wealthy because they have the money, which is called capital, to invest. And that creates, as slowly but surely, it's going to create the Gilded Age, where you have, it's very similar to where we are right now, where you have a very small percentage of the wealthiest people who own banks and own businesses, and they earn the vast majority of the money in the country, as opposed to the everyday person who is not making enough money to keep their head above water, or barely being able to do that. And in the 1800s, we're also looking at slavery. And is this going to be a free state, or is it going to be a slave state? And what are we going to do with Native Americans? Because manifest destiny is basically saying, if you're white and you're European, it's your God-given right to go west. That's a pretty big thought. It's a pretty big assumption, and it's pretty arrogant, really, which is kind of typical of the way America was created. And I'm not saying that with judgment. It is what it is. That's the reality of it. We can't do anything about the past, but if we know about it, we understand it, then the judgment should come going forward. How do we address the issues that were created in the past? So, and that's up to each of you. But in order for you to really deal with that and tackle those questions going forward, I think it's very important that you understand this premise of Manifest Destiny, which says, hey, if you're white and you're European background, you have a God-given right to go west. Okay, you have a God-given right to go west, but what does that do to Native Americans? Now you're encroaching on lands of Native Americans, and instead of recognizing them, understanding who they are, trying to be good neighbors with them, no. We just encroach on their land. We consider them less than human, and then in many cases in the mid-1800s, under the Jacksonian era and the Indian Removal Act, we have Native American children being taken from their parents and put into boarding schools where their hair is cut. They are not allowed to use their native language. They have to wear Western European clothes. They basically are being transferred, or are trying to be mutated into a white European, which is not what they are. And they're punished for being who they are. And this is part of Manifest Destiny. In conjunction with that is this concept of movement of money and wealth. And what we also see are whites who go west, who kill buffalo for their hides and leave them dead, skinned in the open, acres of these buffalo with babies by their side, crying for their mothers who are dead. It's a horrific sight, and it's real. It's part of our history. So while Manifest Destiny helps move our country west, the way in which we do it is in many ways unconscionable. Andrew Jackson, as he comes in, he is dubbed the Indian Killer. That's his nickname. His nickname is Indian Killer because he hated Native Americans. I mean, he really did not like them. And he thought they were less than human. And he was crazy about this. And I think that that's an important aspect of, we judge presidents and we judge the leaders of our country, and we assume that this is new to our country, and it's not necessarily, leaders in every country, not just in America. There's good aspects to them and bad aspects to them, and none of them are ever going to be all good, and actually none of them, I think, are ever all bad. But there is a balancing between them, and Andrew Jackson was considered a man of the people. Truly, he had his whole inaugural party at the White House, on the White House lawn, and the next morning there are people who were wasted, sleeping on the grass and sleeping in the White House. I mean, it was just crazy. And but he instituted, with the help of Congress, laws that really did institutionalize. Now, laws that are on the books, that is being quote unquote institutionalized. You're making the law for everyone to follow. And so that's what I'm talking about. It is institutionalized racism with Native Americans, because now Native Americans have just lost their property and they're being moved against their will to a new area. Now, the Cherokee and the Creek were some of them who in North Carolina who were moved against their will to Oklahoma, but then they were moved again. It was a very long, an arduous walk. That's where we get the Trail of Tears, where thousands, tens of thousands of Native Americans died along the way. They were force marched by the army. Think about that. That's not a good thought, but it's true. And then as they moved, and the reason why they were moved was to make way for westward expansion. Now, as we're moving west, and as we're pushing out Native American tribes, and as we are building out an infrastructure, transportation system to build cities, to send goods back and forth between the new West, which is not yet all the way to California. We're looking at Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska, Illinois. These are states that are the states in between the 1820s to the 1850s. We don't really get the land rush or the gold rush until the 1850s in San Francisco, where up until about the 1830s, we have Spaniards who had been there from the earliest Spanish exploration from the 1500s, where they went up through Mexico into the Southwest and up into California, where that's where we get San Jose, and that's where we get Los Angeles and San Diego, Sacramento. These are all places that are from those Spaniards, and they were there for a couple of hundred years. And then, of course, with the land rush in San Francisco, we just pretty much, as we do everybody else, we pretty much get rid of those Spaniards, and we take over those lands as well. So by the 1830s, we're looking at a movement west where we're going in like a big old tidal wave, and we're just taking stuff up as it pleases us. Part of what we're taking up is land, right? It's not just about building little towns or moving Native Americans. Who's going in there? Well, farmers are going in there. There are different kinds of agricultural people who are going in there who are now trying to figure out whether they are going to use slaves or whether there's going to be free labor. And so the beginning that leads really kind of like, we can see the snowball effect beginning in the 1820s, 1830s, as we go westward expansion between slave states and free states. And the slave states, there's fighting between the two. In Kansas, they called it Bleeding Kansas, because for 10 years they were fighting each other over whether or not they would be a slave state or a free state. And all this has to do with power, money, and leverage. Who's going to be, if this state becomes a state, it's not a territory, it's going to turn into a state. Once it hits a certain population count, then there's going to be 2 senators and how many congressmen? And anyway, I'm low on my battery. Hold on one second. I'm going to move us to a different room. Okay, stay with me now. Hopefully this will be okay. Put on the light. Yes. Go to the actual room where it happens. My home office. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So there we go. That's better. All right. So is it going to be a slave state or a free state? Once again, this has to do with money. Because whoever has a state, those representatives and those senators are going to advocate for slavery if it's a slave state. If they're not, if they're a free state, they're going to advocate for abolition. And if too many states that are forming because of Manifest Destiny are free states, then there are going to be more free states in the federal government than there are going to be slave states. So there are going to be more people to advocate for abolition. If you have more slave states than you have free states, then the practice of slavery will stay. So you have more people who are going to advocate for slavery. So it's not simply, we're not talking about concerns over how people are being treated. We're not there. Where we are is, I am wealthy because, or I want my power because I have slaves and I want to maintain slavery. Or I think slavery is bad. I believe in the abolition of slavery and the end of slavery. And so I'm going to advocate for that. And so it's going to be a power struggle between these two groups of people. And that power struggle has to do with power and leverage, with how they're, who not only is going to be able to have power to advocate, but it has everything also to do with wealth. Because if you have a bunch of folks in there who are plantation owners and they're super wealthy, then they can manipulate just as easily the system just as easily as industrialists. I mean, everybody really wants the same thing, which is I want to make money. And it isn't just I want to make money. And that's another thing that's very important here as well. And certainly as we are going into this time of this coronavirus, we're all, as American citizens and global citizens, really asked. We're asked. And we are told, don't go anywhere. Stay home. You're quarantined. Wear something over your face if you absolutely have to go out. These are real. And there are some people who violate it. Why do they violate it? Is it simply because it's boring? Is it because to think about it too long, it's scary? And so therefore, I'm not going to think about it at all? Is it because I don't really believe it's happening? This is just BS. It's not for real. This is not going to affect me. So, these are the same kinds of things. I mean, people still, we all think the same. We haven't changed. And, since 1850s, industrialists, plantation owners, this is how they wanted the world. They wanted the world to be like they are accustomed. They're masters of their universe, and they want to maintain it. And we're masters of our universe, right? We go, hey, there are some people who believe that they're in charge of their world and they are put out by having to make any changes. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't these people in the mid-1800s? I mean, no, they didn't have a pandemic, but at the heart of everything, it's very, very similar feelings. If you feel like you are in charge, you want to feel like you're in charge of your life, you want to feel that you are in charge of your world, you've worked very hard to to build something, and you justify and rationalize what you've done. That's the way it is. And these plantation owners and these industrialists, look, none of them were perfect or great. I'm no hellfire. Shouldn't say that. But slavery was unconscionable. It was horrible in this country. It was the worst that it's been ever anywhere in the history of the world. Anyone who uses, well, there was slavery in the Bible as an excuse to say, oh, that's why we had slavery, didn't actually read the Bible or does not understand why there was slavery in the Bible and or what that slavery was like, because it was never, ever slavery for life. And it was never, ever under those conditions. Even the ancient Hebrews allowed people days of rest, okay? So you can't, you rationalize what it is that you want to believe. And that's what these guys did in the 1850s, 1830s, 1820s, from the time we see Andrew Jackson, after after the War of 1812, as the country is being built out and going west, thanks to Manifest Destiny, and transportation is moving west, and we have ways of moving materials and moving goods, as I said earlier. The people who are in charge want to stay in charge. And people are going west to try and build a new life, to be able to have power they never had before, which is exactly how the country was formed to begin with, by Europeans coming here. Remember Jamestown, show me the money. Right? The same reason why people are moving west. Show me the money. Give me the opportunity I didn't have before. And why would the federal government say no? Federal government's not going to say no, because what's the federal government going to get out of people moving west eventually? Taxes. What did Great Britain try to impose on the American colonies, which led to independence? Taxes. It comes to money. Something that's really rather uncomfortable to talk about and to think about, but that's what it comes to. And even now, if you really want to learn the truth about something, follow the money. And unfortunately, social consciousness, what is right, socially, morally, ethically, doesn't always come into the picture, because somehow or another, there are a lot of folks who will rationalize all those things away, because power is so intoxicating, or the belief that you're going to have power. And that can drive people to do things that they would never have thought they could do before. And I think that that's important, especially now, as we handle this crisis. Why would you do something that you shouldn't do? Because you feel like you deserve it? Because you're losing your mind being inside with your family? That could be. That's a good reason to go for a walk around the block. Go into your bedroom and cry into your pillow. I get it. I really do. Being in is not fun unless you get along really well with your family and you like to play video games, or maybe you're an introvert. But for a lot of folks, it's really driving them nuts. And so their need, their desire to get the heck out of Dodge is rationalized away somewhere in the back of their mind, like, this isn't going to happen to me, or I'll deal with it, or it's just pushed down and not really addressed, because what they want overrides that rational thought. And as Manifest Destiny moves us forward, that concept that it's God-given for us to go west overrides any other reasonable thought that has to do with, well, who's in the way? Do we have the right to do this? Well, God, President's saying that God gives us the right to do this. But why? Do we really? Is there introspection? Is there reflection with this? And while we're not in a position, this is 2020, we're not in a position to really look back and berate and be mean or hateful to the people of the past. And that is not my intention. But the reality is the reality. The facts remain the facts. This is what people did in this country as they were moving west. And Manifest Destiny, by its very name, is really, and definition, is this belief that we have every right to do whatever we want to do, whenever we want to do it, to justify our movement west and the expansion of what is going to become the United States. So the discussion board question below is addressing this. There's a lot to this now, okay? There's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of detail. I don't expect you to know everything, but I do expect you to be paying attention, even with all the craziness, at least some of the basic concepts as you read going forward. Take your time every day, take care of yourself, eat well, go out when you can, maintain social distancing, take very good care of yourself. People are getting sick. I'm doing my best to take care of myself. And I want to see every single one of you again in the summer if we get back to school, or in the fall when classes resume again. I want to see all your wonderful faces. So please don't rationalize this way. Please know you are important and that you should be doing the things you need to do, not rationalizing why you can do what you want to do if you're in a position to do that. So make sure that you answer the discussion board, use your own words, and know that I'm thinking about you, and I miss you every day, and I love you, mean it. Mwah. And I hope you guys have a great week. I'm here if you need me. Okay? Just email. Bye.